Let's now look at Chapter 8. And Chapter 8 looks at regulation and ethics. And you might think, okay, this is the dry chapter, but actually it's very important to the market, that there's a strong regulatory system in place, but also that individuals in the markets have a strong code of ethics. So it's not just the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law is followed as well. And that's what this chapter goes into. So a weighting of 5 questions, 10% of your exam. There's areas on anti-money laundering, there's areas on insider dealing, but other specific areas as well that are worth picking up. Okay, so we look at money laundering, we look at insider dealing and market abuse, and then also going into what is ethics actually, ethics in practice. And you'll see the CISI's code of ethics as well. Okay. So firstly, in terms of the need for regulation, there is a risk of losing money. When you invest, you might get, somebody might say something that isn't true. You might invest in a company, but actually there is some insider dealing going on. Okay, so we need regulation because it protects us. Okay, as markets develop, there grew a need that market participants said, well, we could lose money. What if we succumb to fraud? Okay, so they agreed to standard behaviors and they said there should be a mechanism that deals with disputes. Okay, but what we're going to do is we're going to have self-regulation. Okay, so people need to administer themselves, and then if a problem comes, we'll deal with it at the dispute resolution. But then markets got a lot more active and things got global, so there needed to be something more on a national level or a statutory level. So there was a statutory approach, and there were independent regulatory bodies that looked at securities, that later then looked at derivatives that were needed to form. But things got more global, and there was international trade of securities and of investments and of different deals. So now they needed international cooperation between the regulatory body, and hence we had the formation of IOSCO, or the International Organization of Securities Commissions. So ESCA in the US, the FCA in the UK, these would all be securities commissions. Okay, and they design objectives and standards that are used by world regulators, international benchmarks for different areas, and naturally liaise with all the national regulators, the ones that are members. Okay, generally these are regulatory principles that we see globally. In your own country you might add and subtract some areas, but generally these are the ones that are there as the objectives of the regulators. They need to maintain and promote fairness, efficiency, competitiveness, transparency, and orderliness in the markets. Okay, so securities trading should be fair, should be competitive and efficient. Okay, they need to promote the understanding by the public of the operation and functioning of the financial services industry. So people need to know that a stock exchange is safe, it works in this way. If you want to buy this, this is where you go, etc. They need to provide protection for members of the public when investing or holding financial products. Not everyone is well versed in the financial markets. They might have made their money from oil and gas. Now they've got some wealth, they want to invest it. Just because they don't fully understand it should not mean that they're not protected. So we need a system where their investments are protected from fraud, from people misleading them and other areas. They need to minimize crime and misconduct. They want to reduce systemic risks that affect the whole market. They want to assist in maintaining stability of the financial markets and take appropriate steps to ensure that. These are general principles that we see globally within regulators, securities regulators. Okay, let's look at money laundering. Now, really important, money laundering has 3 stages. They go in this order. Okay, common question is to put them in the right order. They tell you the 3 in a jumbled up order, and then there's 4 answers telling you what the order could be or should be. And you've got to have a guess, or hopefully with an educated guess, or even better with certainty, select the correct answer. Okay. In money laundering now, firstly, money laundering is clear where the proceeds of the money, the source of the money has come from illegal practices or criminal activity. But that is outside of money laundering. That could be drug trafficking. That could be tax evasion. But that is not part of the money laundering process or the money laundering crime. That's its own crime. Okay. Now, so the first stage of money laundering is where they take these funds that came from criminal activity, okay, and try and place it in the financial system. And why do they do that? Because they feel they may be able to hide the true source. So when asked, they say, well, we made our money through this investment in this company. Okay. So remember, the source was illegal. But the first stage of money laundering is placing that in the financial system. Okay? Maybe depositing in a bank, maybe buying an investment. Okay? The second stage is layering. So to try and make it look like the money has been made from investments, what they do is they take the money from the system, from the bank or building society it's in, and invest it in something. Then they sell that, they buy something else. They sell and buy something else. They layer. The second stage is moves money around to make it difficult to trace, difficult to see what was the underlying source of that money. And then they integrate it. So the third stage, part of the crime of money laundering, okay, and even assisting in these things is a crime, okay, the third stage is integrating it and making it look like clean money. Because if asked, you say, well, the source of that is I just made a lot of money from that investment, okay? And then they say, well, where did the money from there come from? And you say, well, that came from an investment I sold over here on this date. And you show them proof. Okay? But naturally, there's strong rules and investigations into money laundering, so you're not going to get away with this. Okay? But integration, the third stage, is making it look like it was clean. Now investing it into real estate, into another financial product, or drawing out the cash and using it. Okay? So placement, layering, integration. 3 stages of money laundering. Okay. What about reporting of money laundering? Well, there's a lot of regulation around this. It's one of the main financial crimes in most countries. It's a jail sentence if you're found guilty of this. It's a regulation surrounding financial crime making an offense to fail to disclose even a suspicion of money laundering. So you may work in a financial institution and you had knowledge or you suspected, but you didn't raise the alarm bells. That would mean the company is liable for maybe not training you enough, but also potentially yourself as an individual. I know I'm not speaking to anyone in particular here, but effectively whichever individual did get involved in this, even if it wasn't them who had the criminal proceeds, they may assist in this process or even fail to disclose. The staff must be trained to recognize and deal with transactions that are suspicious, okay, that may be, okay. Training is essential, and that's down to the company. There should be a disclosure of suspicions, okay, that needs to be made to the legal authorities, but what you'll probably have internally is first you will disclose it, if it's your line manager, depending on the company you're in, or to the MLRO. Each financial institution would have a money laundering reporting officer. And hence it's reported to them, they are dealing with the regulators. The MLRO then decide whether the suspicion has to be reported to the authorities or if they investigate and they say, actually, it's fine. Okay? Reporting to the MLRO or the authorities, you're now clear. Okay? You had a suspicion, you reported it, okay, under the law, and now you're clear. Okay? But naturally, you'll take advice from the MLRO of the next steps to do. Okay, another form of financial crime is insider dealing. Okay, now what is insider dealing? That is acting on information that is insider information. Now what does that mean? Okay, so a person might have price sensitive information, okay, and either trades or advises someone else to trade on that information. Okay, you may be a director of a company or an employee, and you get information knowing that there's a major acquisition that your company are going to make. It's not yet public information. So for it to be insider, it needs to be non-public. What else does it need to be? It needs to be price sensitive. An example I always give is, let's say you find out that your cousin is going to get hired as a graduate in the company. Now, as nice as that might be for yourself, it probably isn't price sensitive information. And you might have information that is non-public, not everyone knows yet, but it's not price sensitive, so it doesn't fall under inside information. It also needs to be specific. If it's too general, then the individual will probably have an argument in court that it was very general information. I had to put 2 and 3 together to then decide I wanted to trade on it. Okay? So, it has to be specific or precise. It has not been made public, and the question you always ask yourself is, if this was made public, would it be price sensitive? Would it have an effect on the price of the shares or the bonds? Okay? Now, insider information is a form of market abuse. Okay? Market abuse also will have, based on information that is not generally available to the public, but it includes other things. It includes things that where you give a false or misleading impression. You make something up, but you want to give an impression that there are a lot of people buying this security because you hold this security. Or you try and distort the market. You sell a huge amount, pushes the price down, then you buy at a cheaper price. You wanted to buy, but you scared the market by selling a huge amount. Or maybe you just gave an intention to sell. Okay? So false or misleading impressions would consist of market abuse. In all 3 cases, the behavior is judged on the basis of what a regular user of the market would do, okay, when hearing that information, as a failure to observe the standards of behavior normally expected in the market. And so that's how these things would be determined. But of course, your regulator or the law enforcement bodies would have to look at the case. Okay. Really important, particularly in the exam world, is which of the following is not covered by insider dealing. So these are all covered, included. If you insider deal and buy or sell shares with inside information, yes, you could be found guilty. Bonds, warrants, depository receipts, options, futures, CFDs, contracts for differences. All of these are covered. So what's not covered? Okay, not, well, it's on the list at the bottom, but it will hopefully stick in you if I write it. Not commodities, okay, or derivatives on commodities, derivatives or spot, okay, and not funds. We did a whole chapter on funds, okay, so not units or shares in an open-ended collective investment scheme. That scheme may have an exposure to Apple and you have inside information on Apple, but that's not the whole fund. Okay, if Apple skyrocket 50%, okay, that's not going to mean that your entire fund has, because it's diversified. So units, open-ended collective investment schemes, even exchange-traded funds, these would not be covered by the insider dealing rules. Okay, let's take this now into the world of ethics and integrity. Okay, so first question here is, why do people behave unethically? And we have a sort of answer to that from the former group chairman of HSBC, Stephen Green. Part of the responsibility of top management is to ensure that the culture of the organization reinforces ethical behavior. Okay? And that's a prerequisite. In other words, right from the top management, there is the tone of ethical behavior. The example set, the people at the top will always have a high influence. So if the people at the top are only looking to make money whatever way that happens, okay, and don't turn down a deal when it may seem like there's money laundering involved, then that's probably going to filter in the organization. When targets are set, people have to meet their numbers. So what the point here is, a culture needs to be created, and that starts at the top. And an example here, you may have come across these kind of examples before, but here we've got a builder or a supplier offers a customer an incentive. They say, we'll give you a discount if you pay in cash. Now you might think, okay, fine, he's giving a discount, that's nice, just giving an incentive. Okay? But there may be that they are trying to not declare this for tax purposes. Okay? So they might be saying, Cash, okay, well, cash, I can just pocket that. I don't need to give an invoice for that. Okay, so what's the primary motivation? Okay, it could be likely they're underreporting their income, and then the authorities cannot collect the legitimate tax, both income tax, VAT, that may be payable on this. Okay, ethically, as a customer, he's just offered you a discount. You could claim, well, I didn't know, he's done something illegal. Okay, but as a customer, you should say, that's the inkling you've got. Well, you want to pay, you want to get the right invoice, you want to make sure that VAT and or income tax is being paid on this. Okay. What are the positive effects? So sometimes you sort of need an argument that why be ethical? Okay. What does it do? What does it do in the long term? What does it do in the broader picture? Well, research shows more business leaders understand that the way they do business is an important aspect of fulfilling their obligations to shareholders and other stakeholders. And this all comes with corporate responsibility and ethical policy. Accept that an ethics policy is one of the essential ingredients to good corporate governance. And corporate governance studies have shown, actually, the better the corporate governance, the better the share price performance. So there's in it from a monetary point of view as well. Modern corporate governance measures include risk assessments, recognizing that if, negative news comes out, there's reputation risk, branding issues, lack of trust to the company and the individuals in the company. Okay, so it could be a source of future problems. Good ethical approaches also leads to more employee retention. People like where they're working. It sits with their value system. And naturally also that passes on to clients and customers and retaining them as well. Okay. What about if you're faced with a dilemma? You've got a situation and there's an ethical dilemma you're going through. You need to hit a target. You haven't had a great month, but this is a great deal. But maybe the source of the funds is illegal. Maybe you smell or suspect something a little bit dodgy. Okay? There will be situations at work when you're faced with a decision. It's not always obvious at the start. So now you've built a relationship. Now you find something out. Okay? And is what we're doing right? So here's a little checklist. Open. Is everyone whom your action or decision affects fully aware of what's going to happen? Is it open to the stakeholders of this deal? Okay. Does it comply with any law or regulation that you have to adhere to? Maybe that's global, local, yourself, your client. Is the individuals involved transparent? Okay. All parties involved know what's happening with every party, or are you trying to hide something from someone, or is someone trying to hide something from another party? Is it fair? Will everyone feel that they've got a fair deal? Okay. Is the transactional decision fair to everyone involved? And an often test that's come is, would you be happy on the front page of the press or in the media, your name with the headline of what's happening, would you be happy if that went on the front page press, the newspaper test? Or would you be happy your grandma saw it or your parents saw it? Okay. And if the answer is no, then it may tell you that maybe there's something a little bit unethical in the activity. So what's the difference between ethics and compliance to rules and regulations? So ethics looks more at prevention, whereas compliance looks more at detection of the problem. Ethics is more principles-based or spirit of the law, whereas compliance is more rules, follow certain rules, more letter of the law. Okay? Ethics comes from an innate value system that we may have. Okay? Whereas compliance is follow these rules or else. This is the penalty, this is the punishment, more fear-driven. Ethics is implicit in the rules, it's spirit of the law, whereas compliance has to be rules-driven and hence explicit. Ethics, of course, this is a key part. Ethics is discretionary. You can't be found guilty for having poor ethics. But we've seen that that might lead to loss of customers or clients. Okay? Not being trusted. Whereas compliance, there's penalties, so it's mandatory. Okay? And look back. Is it the thing you should have done? What you ought to do? Is it the right thing to do? Not just because you had to follow the rules. Okay. This here, guys, is the CISI's Code of Conduct. Worth learning. There are 7 of them. They may ask you which of the following is not one of these. Okay. What is there? Act honestly and fairly at all times. Okay. Act with integrity. Observe the laws in whichever country you're in. Applicable law. Or maybe you have to adhere to more than one applicable law. Observe standards of integrity and good practice. Okay. And the confidentiality of market participants. Manage fairly and effectively to the best of your ability. Okay. Actively maintain professional competence. So make sure you're aware of what's going on. Okay. Continuous professional development. Okay. And commit to continued learning and development of others. So if you're managing people, development of others as well. And uphold the highest personal and professional standards. Okay. Now, it doesn't say things like, do not commit fraud, do not do insider dealing, do not get involved in money laundering. That's implicit in these. So if you're looking at questions that have got some of the more explicit things, that's probably one of those that is not explicitly one of these 7. There's not actually word for word one of these 7. And a conclusion to this chapter. Let's consider the words of Guy Jubb, an investment director and head of corporate governance in Standard Life. And he spoke at a much earlier CISI annual ethics debate. And he said, it's personal. We as individuals, we are the city. Okay? We must take our responsibility for restoring trust. Remember, this is 2009, after the financial crisis. And there can be no abdication of responsibility to third parties. We must conduct our affairs as good stewards. We must sort out right from wrong and behave accordingly. Members must live out being good stewards in the interests of their clients. Okay? And I'm sure you appreciate that this is really important in the financial services sector. It's not shipping off the blame. It's making sure that we're ethical in our practice. We take the responsibility seriously. Okay? Okay, that concludes this chapter and one more chapter to come.